talking Inhuman Kiss 2, The Last Breath. This is actually a 2023 Thai movie now being released in the West in 2025. And as the title suggests, this is actually a sequel to a 2019 movie. Now, I haven't seen the original movie, so I'm just giving my thoughts on this one as a kind of a separate entity, and we'll talk about the kind of the connectivity here. Now, this is an interesting horror movie. Obviously, if you're watching this channel, I would presume you're at least a casual horror fan. But if you are a horror fan that has a romantic streak in you, then this may be the film for you. So this concerns a entity called Krasue, which I had never heard of before this movie, and it's a creature from Thai folklore or Asian folklore, and it's kind of like at least in the kind of the folklore, like a demon, a female sort of spirit or something like that, that presents as a kind of a female head with kind of like organs and stuff and tentacles kind of trailing behind. So pretty original, to be fair. And that's kind of what this movie is about, or at least in part. So what's the story? Well, I think it probably ends where the last film left off. At least that's my assumption. Where we've had some type of incident involving this kind of thing before, and now it's moved on to the kind of like the next generation. So the movie starts off with two kids. We've got Sal, who is this young girl, and she actually has this Krasue in her. They describe it more as like a parasite, because like they're looking at it from a scientific point of view, like characters in the movie. But in folklore, it's more like a supernatural kind of entity. And it's effectively like a possession. And they're trying to kind of, they can't cure it, but they're trying to manage it and keep it at bay by using various medicines. But at times, she kind of gets like influenced or controlled by it, and it will come out and make her kind of have sharp teeth and white eyes. But if it goes full on, basically she has like a discombobulated head that kind of like detaches, and then she has these sort of tentacles that come out, and it flies around but moves like a kind of like octopus underwater, except it's like this head flying around with sharp teeth and octopus tentacles underneath. Weird looking, weird. Anyway, she ends up befriending, in a human form, this local boy who is an albino. But he has his own potential supernatural secrets, where he actually has the ability to heal things, and potentially himself as well. And these two become friends as kids, and as the movie progresses, they kind of age up into young adults, and a kind of romance is blossoming. You know, they're trying to kind of still contain this kind of like condition, and trying to manage it. And obviously not everyone knows everything, but to add a further layer into it, we have like a kind of big game hunter type thing who wants this Krasue as a kind of a trophy, I guess. And he sends in this guy who is possessed by another type of demon, who actually is the predator of a Krasue, who like eats their hearts. So now we have this kind of other demonic entity, and you know, neither of these demonic entities are particularly friendly, and they will both kill you. And we have Cloud, who is our sort of genetic mutant type guy in the middle, along with a bunch of other people. Yeah, so what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. Now, you could say that, you know, sometimes these, the films that come out are just rehashes of it's the same old slasher kind of movie, just with a different mask. I have to say, at least this one's original, you know. I know it's going to obviously a sequel, but I've never even heard of this kind of creature before. So it was like pretty interesting, I've got to say, and visually pretty striking and quite disconcerting. You know, we have these scenes where we've basically got a female head with that long hair, but like sharp teeth and wide out eyes with octopus tentacles coming out the neck, and it's flying around. Weird looking, but original, you know. I've never seen anything like it before, and it's like attacking people. And there's other demons, like a kind of like a humanoid bat creature. Yeah, it was like, you know, I gotta say, I thought this was pretty intriguing in regards to some, you know, some elements and some folklore that I have not been exposed to before, and I suspect maybe people in the West certainly are less familiar with it compared to those in Thailand, perhaps. So I thought it was quite an intriguing idea, and I also like the way that they kind of are kind of human characters who know about it, at least, are treating it like a condition, like a pathogen. And they're trying to kind of find ways to manage it. Even though they can't cure it, they're trying to, you know, find ways to suppress it. And I kind of liked this sort of scientific view of having to deal with it. That was kind of quite good. But I think the main hook of this film, if you like, is the romantic kind of plot line, which is really the kind of the A storyline to a degree. And what I think this movie does very well is it's about a love story between two outcasts. And I think it speaks to people who maybe feel disaffected, maybe they feel kind of outcast themselves, they feel like they're kind of outside the norms of you know, society and things like this. And even though these two, you know, one's got up as demon possessing and the other one's kind of is an albino and has genetic mutant powers, obviously they're your kind of avatars for, you know, your own sort of feelings of insecurity and you know, and anxieties and stuff, and you can kind of project yourself into those characters who are kind of taking it to the extreme, so to speak. But I thought it really kind of was almost a good metaphor for those of, you know, those of whom feel disaffected and you know, outside of, as I say, the norm set by today's kind of lifestyle. So I thought that's very good, and I gotta say, this cold black heart, I'm not a big fan of romantic films, I've got to say, but I kind of got the feels in this one a little bit. I thought, wow, you know, I'm actually getting a little bit emotionally invested in this movie. Now, this is a Thai movie, and it's mostly spoken in, obviously, the Thai language. There is a couple of scenes with English, because one of the characters is actually probably American, I would think. But it's mostly spoken in Thai. Now, you can probably watch this because I got this as a screener, and I think you could either watch it as a subtitle or dubbed. So I watched it subtitled. And I'm going to say I think the acting was pretty strong. I mean, it's always a little harder to tell when you're watching, you know, a foreign language movie, because what I'm reading on the subtitles is not necessarily the direct translation of what people are saying. But I thought the acting was strong, you know. And it being set in Thailand, again, we have these kind of great outdoor sequences with this kind of vegetation. You know, the kind of the architecture is in somewhat of a state of disrepair. It gives it this kind of, you know, feeling that we don't necessarily see in films made in like the States or the UK and things like that. It just feels that little bit kind of different, and I think it sort of adds to this kind of this ambience as well. So I actually thought this movie, it does have quite a lot to offer, and the story is intriguing. I mean, it's a longer film; it's just over 2 hours. But I was engaged in the story because I do think it has a lot of facets to it. So, you know, I would say there's a lot to enjoy in this film. So let's talk about what doesn't work, and then let's talk about how it connects to the first one. Bear in mind, I haven't seen it. Now, one of these, I would say you could watch this as a separate movie, as I have, and still kind of get the gist. But I do think the movie could have done a better job establishing the lore here, because it really doesn't give you much in regards to the setup, especially in regards to what these entities are and, you know, how they work and stuff. You know, we learn that this Krasue can affect people by like saliva, but we never really see that happen. We just kind of told, and I'm assuming this is what's happened in the first movie, but what happens to that person? Does it multiply? I mean, it doesn't really say, you know, what caused it and where does it come from, you know. So there's not a lot of context in regards to the lore here about this kind of supernatural stuff. Now you could argue, okay, you could try and come at it from, so like for example, the character of Cloud, who is this albino guy. He doesn't know this, so he's coming into this new. So you could almost take the point of view of him and say, well, he doesn't know any of this, so you can kind of put, you know, his shoes on your feet, so to speak. But nevertheless, when you're kind of looking at the movie as a whole and the sort of setup, I don't know if the movie is particularly strong on catching you up if you haven't seen the first one, even though it's different characters, and as I say, a different generation of characters. And I believe the original movie was, from what I've read at least, because I read afterwards, is the original like parents of Sal, who's our kind of Krasue character. Anyway, so, you know, there's a little bit of kind of like, I don't quite know the setup here, so it's a little bit confusing in kind of regards to that. And then we introduced this other creature later on, who's this bad guy creature, I guess. Don't know anything about him. Nothing. And then we have our kind of big game hunter character who sets this other creature. And I don't even know if he knows that this guy's a creature. We never see him again. It's just like, all right, there's some things here that I think, story-wise, are not particularly, you know, all that kind of fleshed out or satisfying in the way that this kind of story tells them. Smaller elements of the sort of story that make up the story as a whole, if that makes sense. So the gist of the story, I think, is fine, but there are some elements that, you know, could have been expanded upon, and I think maybe there were certain things that could have been trimmed down to incorporate more of a overreaching story, if that makes sense. So there is that. The VFX, these creatures are a mix of kind of some practical and then some CGI effects. The CGI, that's obviously again for a film from Thailand, the CGI is noticeably CGI. And again, I'm a bit forgiving with stuff like this because I understand that, you know, a movie like this from Thailand, it doesn't have the hugest budget in regards to VFX. But, you know, I can see people who are very much against CGI effects would be, would say that this is very noticeable, and it is. I don't know how you would achieve a floating woman's head with octopus tentacles flying around outside of that, but, you know, there it is. Maybe it could have dialed the horror up a little bit more. I mean, we don't get our bad guy creature really enter the story in earnest until the last quarter of the film. And as such, until that point, the first 3 quarters is this kind of character building and the kind of the love story and the relationships and stuff, which is fine. But as I say, it's a 2-hour film. I think you could have had, again, the story could have just been restructured a little bit, I think, to make it a little bit more satisfying overall. I mean, maybe it's because obviously we're talking about you know, a film from another part of the world, and maybe it's more kind of just cultural differences, I suppose. The end of the film, it has this kind of a stinger, which I don't know if it necessarily needed. If it's a minor part, it's after the credits. It seemed kind of pointless. And the only thing I would say, there's some scenes here where characters do die, and there are like, I don't know, it doesn't really feel like people have like a feeling that all that different, like feeling a little bit indifferent about it, you know. And the last thing I would say, in regards to our kind of bad guy creature, we see these scenes where there's like, it looks like he's killed loads of people, but I think it's potentially a dream, but I just don't know whether that actually happened or if it was a dream. So yeah, overall, I've got to say, this is an enjoyable movie overall. It's flawed, possibly, but you know, some of this stuff is perhaps lost in translation. But as a you know, us as a Western audience, I think, regardless of if that is the case or not, it's a flawed movie, but still I would say one that is worth watching. Does have an emotional kind of like hook. Certainly some interesting kind of like monsters and visuals and stuff. I would say, again, if you're a romantic and a horror fan, this is the movie for you. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.